It started with the little things. A late night at work here, a sudden need for me time there. At first, I brushed it off as the typical ebb and flow of married life. After all, we had been together for nearly a decade, and I thought I knew my wife, Sarah, inside and out. But as the days turned into weeks, those little things began to pile up, forming a mountain of doubt that I couldn't ignore. I remember the first time I noticed something was off. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had come home early from work, eager to surprise her with her favorite takeout. The house was quiet, too quiet. I found her in the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her face illuminated by the screen. She quickly locked it and turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey, babe. You're home early." She chirped, but I could sense the tension in her voice. "Yeah, thought I'd surprise you," I replied, trying to sound casual, but my heart was racing. Why had she been so quick to hide her phone? I brushed it off, convincing myself I was being paranoid. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more signs. The way she would laugh a little too hard at her phone, the late-night texts that she would quickly dismiss when I asked about them. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to me like a shadow. I found myself replaying our conversations, searching for clues, for anything that might explain the growing distance between us. One night, as I lay in bed beside her, I couldn't help but feel a chasm forming between us. I turned to her, watching her sleep, her face peaceful and serene. "What's happening to us?" I whispered into the darkness, but the silence that followed felt deafening. I wanted to reach out, to pull her close, but something held me back. A fear that if I touched her, I would shatter the fragile illusion of our perfect life. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I had to know the truth. I started small, casually asking her about her day, her coworkers, trying to gauge her reactions. But every time I brought up her job, I felt her walls go up. "You know how it is, just the usual," she would say, her tone clipped. The more I probed, the more evasive she became, and my heart sank deeper into despair. I found myself spiraling into a pit of anxiety and suspicion. I began to obsess over her phone, wondering if I should check it when she wasn't around. The thought made my stomach churn. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but the fear of betrayal gnawed at me relentlessly. I was caught in a web of my own making, torn between love and suspicion. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. As I strolled through the quiet streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. The laughter we once shared felt like a distant memory, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that hung between us. I thought about the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared, and the love that had once felt unbreakable. How could it all be slipping away? As I walked, I spotted a couple sitting on a bench, their hands intertwined, laughter spilling from their lips. A pang of jealousy shot through me. I wanted that. I wanted to feel secure in my marriage, to trust that the woman I loved was still the same person I had fallen for all those years ago. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered by doubt. When I returned home, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her phone in hand, her expression distant. I wanted to reach out, to ask her what was wrong, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I sat down beside her, my heart heavy with unspoken questions. "Are you okay?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a smile that felt rehearsed. "Of course, I'm fine. Just tired from work," she replied, but I could hear the lie in her voice. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I closed my eyes, hoping for sleep to come, but all I could think about was the woman I loved and the growing distance between us. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, teetering between love and betrayal, and I didn't know how to pull myself back. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and suspicion. I found myself caught in a relentless cycle of doubt, replaying every interaction, every moment with Sarah, searching for clues that might explain her behavior. I knew I had to gather evidence, to confront the truth, but the thought of what I might find terrified me. Still, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut any longer. I started my investigation subtly, trying to remain inconspicuous. I paid closer attention to her phone, noting the times she would receive messages and how she would quickly lock it whenever I entered the room. It was as if her phone had become a secret vault, holding the answers to questions I was too afraid to ask. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was invading her privacy, but the fear of betrayal was stronger than my conscience. One evening, while she was in the shower, I seized the opportunity. My heart raced as I picked up her phone from the kitchen counter. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. What if I found something that shattered my world? But the thought of her laughter echoing through the house, the way she had been pulling away from me, pushed me forward. I unlocked her phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The first thing I noticed was the number of messages from a contact named Mike. My stomach dropped. I had heard her mention Mike before, her coworker, the one she had been working closely with on a project. I clicked on the messages, my hands trembling. The conversation was light at first, filled with jokes and playful banter, but as I scrolled further, my heart sank. There were messages that hinted at something more intimate, something that felt like a betrayal. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one message read, followed by a string of heart emojis. My breath caught in my throat. I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. I quickly locked the phone and placed it back on the counter, my mind racing. I needed to confront her, but I wasn't ready. I needed more proof, something concrete that I could hold on to. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. I reached out to a mutual friend, Lisa, under the guise of wanting to catch up. I knew she worked with Sarah and might have insights into what was happening. As we chatted over coffee, I casually brought up Sarah's name, watching Lisa's reaction closely. "Oh, Sarah? She's been really busy with work lately," Lisa said, her tone light. "But she seems happy. You know how she gets when she's in the zone." I nodded, but my heart sank. I needed more than just vague reassurances. "Have you noticed anything different about her?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Lisa paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "Well, she did mention something about a late-night project with Mike. But I wouldn't worry too much. They're just colleagues, right? Just colleagues." The words echoed in my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. I thanked Lisa for her time and left the cafe, my heart heavy with uncertainty. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, peering into an abyss of betrayal, and I was terrified of what I might find if I jumped. That evening, I decided to follow Sarah. It was a decision born out of desperation, a need to uncover the truth. I waited until she left for work, then slipped into my car, my heart racing as I followed her. I felt like a voyeur, a man peering into the private life of someone I loved, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to know. As I trailed her through the city, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. I watched as she pulled into a parking lot, her car coming to a stop outside a trendy restaurant. My heart sank. I parked a distance away, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I watched as she stepped out of the car, her laughter ringing out like a siren's call. Moments later, Mike appeared, his tall frame and easy smile making my blood boil. They embraced, a friendly hug that felt far too intimate for my liking. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I watched them enter the restaurant together. I wanted to scream, to confront them right then and there, but I held back, knowing I needed to gather more evidence. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, as they sat at a table inside. I could see them through the window, their heads bent close together, laughter spilling from their lips. I felt like an intruder in my own life, a man watching the woman he loved slip away from him. The longer I watched, the more my heart shattered. I couldn't believe this was happening. After what felt like an eternity, they finished their meal and left the restaurant, walking side by side, their bodies angled toward each other. I followed them at a distance, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and heartbreak. They stopped at a nearby bar, and I felt a surge of anger. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to confront her, to demand the truth. As I drove home that night, my heart was heavy with the weight of what I had witnessed. I felt like a ghost in my own life, haunted by the specter of betrayal. I knew I had to confront Sarah, but the thought filled me with dread. What would I say? How could I face the woman I loved, knowing she had betrayed me? The truth was a bitter pill to swallow, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. But deep down, I knew I had to. I couldn't live in this limbo any longer. I needed to know if our love was worth fighting for or if it had already crumbled into dust. The night after my surveillance felt like a fever dream. I tossed and turned in bed, the images of Sarah and Mike laughing together replaying in my mind like a broken record. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw them leaning in close, sharing secrets that should have been mine. I felt like a stranger in my own home, a man haunted by the specter of betrayal. The weight of my discovery pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. I woke up the next morning with a sense of urgency coursing through my veins. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to confront Sarah, to demand answers. But the thought of facing her filled me with dread. What if she denied everything? What if she turned it all around on me, making me feel like the villain for doubting her? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee, I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions any longer. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I thought about the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared, the love that had once felt unbreakable. I couldn't let it slip away without a fight. The decision to confront her crystallized in my mind as I replayed the events of the past few weeks. I thought about the late nights, the evasive answers, the laughter that felt like a dagger to my heart. I had seen enough. I had gathered enough evidence to know that something was terribly wrong. I couldn't ignore it any longer. But how would I do it? I couldn't just blurt it out over breakfast. I needed to choose the right moment, a time when we could talk without distractions. I thought about her upcoming business trip with Mike. It was the perfect opportunity. I could crash their trip, confront them both, and finally get the answers I so desperately needed. As the day wore on, I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. I spent hours planning my approach, rehearsing what I would say. I imagined the confrontation in my mind, picturing Sarah's face when I revealed what I knew. Would she be shocked? Would she deny everything? I felt a knot of fear in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. I had to do this. When Sarah came home that evening, I acted as if everything was normal. I greeted her with a smile, masking the turmoil brewing inside me. We chatted about our days, but my mind was elsewhere, focused on the plan I had set in motion. I could feel the tension building between us, a silent acknowledgement of the distance that had grown in our relationship. As she prepared for her trip, I watched her pack her suitcase, my heart racing. I felt like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I held back, knowing that the time for confrontation was near. I needed to wait until she was gone, until I could follow her and catch her in the act. That night, as we lay in bed, I felt the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. I turned to her, my heart pounding. "Are you excited about your trip?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She smiled, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Yeah, it should be fun. Just a few days of work and some team bonding." "Sounds great," I replied, forcing a smile. But inside, I was a storm of emotions, fear, anger, heartbreak. I wanted to shake her, to demand the truth, but I knew I had to be patient. I had to wait for the right moment. The next morning, as she prepared to leave, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I watched her kiss me goodbye, her smile bright and carefree. "I'll miss you," she said, her voice cheerful. I forced a smile in return, but inside, I was a whirlwind of emotions. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into the unknown. As soon as she left, I sprang into action. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, my heart racing with anticipation. I had to follow her, to confront her and Mike. I felt a mix of dread and determination as I drove toward the hotel where they would be staying. The thought of what I might find filled me with anxiety, but I pushed it aside. I needed to know the truth. The drive felt like an eternity, each passing moment heightening my anxiety. I replayed the plan in my mind, envisioning the confrontation. I imagined Sarah's face when she saw me, the shock in her eyes. Would she deny everything? Would she beg for forgiveness? I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak, but I knew I had to stay focused. As I pulled into the hotel parking lot, my heart raced. I parked a distance away, taking a moment to collect myself. I could see the hotel entrance, the bustle of guests coming and going. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. This was it. I was about to confront the woman I loved and the man who had betrayed me. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I walked toward the entrance, each step bringing me closer to the truth. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, the anticipation building as I approached the lobby. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, ready to confront the reality of my shattered marriage. As I stepped into the hotel lobby, the air felt thick with tension, and my heart raced with every beat. The soft hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses from the bar area faded into the background as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of Sarah and Mike. I felt like a predator stalking its prey, my instincts heightened, my senses on high alert. This was it, the moment I had been dreading and anticipating all at once. I spotted the reception desk and approached, my palms clammy and my throat dry. "Excuse me," I said to the receptionist, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for a couple who might be checking in. Sarah Thompson and Mike Reynolds." The receptionist glanced at her computer screen, her fingers tapping away. "Yes, they just checked in a few minutes ago. Room 312. My stomach dropped. I forced a nod of thanks and turned away, my mind racing. Room 312. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, a mix of fear and determination propelling me forward. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves as I made my way to the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. What was I doing? Was I really about to confront my wife and her lover? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I pushed it aside. I had to know the truth. I had to confront them. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened on the third floor. I stepped out, my heart pounding in my chest as I walked down the corridor toward room 312. Each step felt like a mile, the anticipation building with every inch I covered. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, a relentless drumbeat urging me forward. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. What if I was wrong? What if this was all a misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew the truth. I had seen the messages, witnessed the laughter, and felt the distance between us grow. I couldn't turn back now. With a deep breath, I knocked on the door, my heart racing. The sound echoed in the hallway, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. I waited, my breath caught in my throat, and after a moment, I heard footsteps approaching. The door swung open, and there stood Sarah, her eyes wide with shock. "James," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. I could see the surprise etched on her face, but beneath it lay something else, fear. My heart sank as I took in her appearance. She looked beautiful, her hair cascading over her shoulders, but the sight of her only fueled my anger. "Surprise," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I thought I'd drop by and see how your business trip was going." Her expression shifted from shock to panic, and I could see her scrambling for words. I didn't expect you here. I thought you were at work." "Clearly," I replied, my voice cold. "I guess you didn't think I'd find out about you and Mike." At the mention of his name, her face paled. "James, please, let me explain," she stammered, but I wasn't in the mood for explanations. I pushed past her, stepping into the room, my heart racing with a mix of anger and betrayal. Mike was sitting on the edge of the bed, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion as he took in the scene. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between Sarah and me. I turned to him, my anger boiling over. "You know exactly what's going on, don't you? You think you can just waltz in and take my wife from me?" "James, this isn't what it looks like," Mike said, raising his hands defensively. "We were just working on a project together." "Working on a project?" I scoffed, my voice rising. "Is that what you call it? Because it sure looked like more than that when I saw you two at the restaurant." Sarah's eyes widened, and I could see the panic rising in her. "James, please, let's talk about this," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Sarah?" I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it if not an affair? Because I've seen the messages, I've watched you two together. You can't deny it anymore." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see the guilt etched on her face, and it felt like a dagger to my heart. "You've been lying to me," I said, my voice breaking. "All this time, you've been lying to my face." "James, I'm so sorry," she finally said, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." "Did it?" I shot back, my anger boiling over. "Did it just happen, or did you choose this? Did you choose him over me?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of her betrayal hanging in the air, suffocating and heavy. I turned to Mike, my fists clenched at my sides. "You think this is a game? You think you can just take what's mine?" "James, please," Mike said, his voice steady but laced with concern. "This isn't just about you. Sarah and I." "Don't you dare speak her name," I shouted, my voice echoing in the small room. "You don't get to defend yourself. You're just as guilty as she is." Sarah stepped forward, her hands trembling. "James, please, let's just talk. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you." "Love?" I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and hollow. "You call this love? Because it feels like betrayal to me." Tears streamed down her face, and I felt a pang of sorrow for the woman I once loved. But the anger was too strong, too consuming. I couldn't let her words sway me. "You need to decide, Sarah," I said, my voice low and steady. "Do you want to be with him, or do you want to fight for us?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle between love and desire. But deep down, I knew the answer. I had seen the way she looked at him, the way she laughed with him. I had seen enough. As I stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, I realized that this was the beginning of the end. The love we had built together was crumbling before my eyes, and I was powerless to stop it. The silence that followed my question felt like a chasm, an abyss that threatened to swallow us whole. I could see the gears turning in Sarah's mind, the conflict playing out on her face. I wanted to scream, to shake her and demand she choose me, but I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of the moment was suffocating, and I could feel the air thickening around us. "James, please," Sarah finally said, her voice trembling. "I never meant for this to happen. I love you, but I don't know what to do." "Don't know what to do?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my voice. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, and you don't know what to do? You've made your choice, Sarah. You've made it clear where your heart lies." Mike shifted uncomfortably on the bed, his eyes darting between us. "This isn't helping anyone," he said, trying to interject reason into the chaos. "We need to talk about this calmly." "Calmly?" I spat, my anger flaring. "You think I can be calm when I'm standing here watching my wife betray me? You think I can just sit back and let this happen?" "James, please," Sarah pleaded, stepping closer to me, her hands outstretched as if to bridge the gap between us. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. I didn't plan for any of this." "Didn't plan?" I repeated, my voice rising again. You think that makes it any better? You think that excuses the fact that you've been lying to me for weeks? Tears streamed down her face, and I felt a pang of sorrow for the woman I had once loved so fiercely. But the anger was too strong, too consuming. I couldn't let her words sway me. You need to decide, Sarah, I said, my voice low and steady. Do you want to be with him, or do you want to fight for us? I want to fight for us, she cried, desperation lacing her voice. I love you, James. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I want to make it right. Make it right? I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. How do you plan to make this right? By pretending it never happened? By sweeping it under the rug? I don't know, she shouted, her voice breaking. I just know that I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you. I turned to Mike, my anger boiling over. And you? What do you have to say for yourself? Do you think this is a game? Do you think you can just take what's mine and walk away without consequences? James, I never meant for this to happen, Mike said, his voice steady but tinged with regret. We were just working together, and things got complicated. I didn't want to hurt you either. Complicated? I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You think this is complicated? This is betrayal, plain and simple. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. The tension in the room was palpable, a thick fog of emotions swirling around us. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, suffocating and relentless. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I held back, knowing that I needed to stay focused. I needed to know where we stood. Sarah, look at me, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. You need to be honest with yourself. Do you want to be with him, or do you want to fight for our marriage? She hesitated, her eyes darting between Mike and me, and in that moment, I felt my heart shatter. I had seen the way she looked at him, the way she laughed with him. I had seen enough. I don't know, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I care about Mike, but I love you. I don't want to lose you. The admission hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, the reality of our situation crashing down around me. I had hoped for a different answer, a sign that our love was worth fighting for, but instead, I was met with uncertainty. Then you need to make a choice, I said, my voice low and steady. Because I can't keep living like this. I can't keep wondering if you're going to choose him over me. I don't want to choose, she cried, her voice breaking. I want both. I want you both. Both? I echoed, disbelief flooding my veins. You think you can have both? You think you can keep me and him in your life without consequences? I don't know, she shouted, her frustration boiling over. I just know that I'm confused. I never wanted to hurt you. Confused? I repeated, my voice rising again. You've made your choice, Sarah. You've made it clear where your heart lies. The silence that followed was deafening, a heavy weight pressing down on us. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words hanging between us like a noose. I turned to Mike, my fists clenched at my sides. You need to leave, I said, my voice cold and steady. I don't want to see you again. James, please, Sarah pleaded, her eyes wide with fear. Don't do this. We can work through this together. No, I said firmly, my heart racing. You need to figure out what you want. I can't be a part of this mess any longer. As I turned to leave, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I had hoped for a different outcome, a sign that our love was worth fighting for, but instead, I was met with uncertainty. I stepped out of the room, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, and I knew that this was the beginning of the end. The moment I stepped out of that hotel room, I felt as if I had left a part of myself behind. The door closed with a soft click, but the sound echoed in my mind like a gunshot. I walked down the corridor, my heart heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. Each step felt like a mile, the reality of my shattered marriage crashing down around me. I had confronted the truth, but it had come at a cost I wasn't sure I was ready to bear. As I reached the elevator, I leaned against the wall, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, anger, heartbreak, confusion. I had hoped for clarity, for a resolution, but instead, I was left with more questions than answers. What would happen now? Could we ever go back to the way things were? The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. I stared at my reflection in the polished metal, a stranger staring back at me. My eyes were red-rimmed, my expression a mix of pain and determination. I had fought for my marriage, but now I was left with the remnants of a love that felt like it had slipped through my fingers. As I drove home, the streets blurred past me, a haze of lights and shadows. I felt numb, as if I were floating through life without any real connection to the world around me. The laughter we once shared echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of what I had lost. I thought about the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared, the love that had once felt unbreakable. How could it all have unraveled so quickly? When I arrived home, the silence was deafening. I stepped inside, the familiar surroundings feeling foreign and cold. I wandered through the house, each room a reminder of the love we had once shared. I could still see her in the kitchen, laughing as she cooked, or curled up on the couch with a book. But now, those memories felt tainted, overshadowed by the betrayal that had shattered our bond. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands, and let the tears flow. I had never imagined I would find myself in this position, grappling with the reality of infidelity. The pain was sharp and relentless, a wound that felt like it would never heal. I thought about Sarah, about the love we had shared, and the choices that had led us to this moment. In the days that followed, I found myself in a haze of confusion and heartbreak. I avoided her calls, unable to face the woman who had betrayed me. I needed space to think, to process what had happened. I spent hours lost in thought, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. I had wanted answers, but all I had received was uncertainty. Eventually, Sarah reached out, desperate to talk. I could hear the pain in her voice, the regret that laced her words. "James, please, I need to see you," she pleaded. "I want to make this right." But how could she make it right? The trust had been shattered, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be rebuilt. I agreed to meet her, but I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. What could she possibly say that would change anything? When we met at a small cafe, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words. I could see the pain etched on her face, the guilt that weighed her down. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. I made a terrible mistake." "Did you?" I replied, my voice cold. "Because it feels like you made a choice. You chose him over me." "I didn't mean for it to happen," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, James. I want to fight for us." "Love?" I echoed, disbelief flooding my veins. "You think love is enough to fix this? You think you can just say the words and everything will go back to normal?" "I know I messed up," she said, her voice breaking. "But I want to make it right. I want to rebuild what we had." I looked at her, searching for any sign of sincerity, but all I saw was a woman grappling with the consequences of her actions. "Rebuild?" I repeated, my heart aching. "How can we rebuild when the foundation is cracked? How can I trust you again?" "I'll do whatever it takes," she promised, her eyes pleading. "I'll go to counseling, I'll be transparent. I'll do anything to prove to you that I want to make this work." I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of reality. "I don't know if I can do this, Sarah," I admitted, my voice heavy with emotion. "I don't know if I can trust you again." The conversation continued, a back and forth of emotions and regrets, but deep down, I knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. Trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered, and I wasn't sure if we could ever reclaim what we had lost. As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. I knew I had to take time for myself, to figure out what I truly wanted. The love we had shared was still there, but it was buried beneath layers of pain and betrayal. I needed to heal, to find my footing again before I could even consider the possibility of rebuilding our relationship. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself. I sought therapy, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions that had consumed me. I learned to navigate the complexities of love, trust, and betrayal, and I began to understand that healing was a process, not a destination. Sarah and I remained in contact, but the conversations were different now. We spoke openly about our feelings, our fears, and the possibility of rebuilding our relationship. It was a slow and painful journey, but I could see the glimmers of hope in her eyes, the determination to make things right. As time passed, I began to find my footing again. I learned to embrace the uncertainty, to accept that healing takes time. I realized that love is not just about the good times, it's also about weathering the storms together. In the end, I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I was willing to fight for our love. I had confronted the truth, faced the pain, and emerged stronger on the other side. Whether we would find our way back to each other remained to be seen, but I was ready to take that journey, one step at a time.